Morning, it's Sean with a driver's perspective. I gotta work fast here. We're at the dyno and things get expensive really fast when you're at a dyno. So we're gonna work through the car, being on the rollers, and then afterwards we'll talk about it, have a breakdown, look at the data, and go from there. We're back. So I'm obviously not at the dyno anymore, and that's because the dyno is a very expensive place to be. They generally charge by the hour, so it's in my best interest and it's in your best interest when you're at the dyno to work efficiently. So that means not a lot of time to film, but I actually wanted to do it this way so I would have more time to talk about the results and go into depth a little bit more about what happened, what went on, and what the testing procedure was, so you can understand how to maybe A/B test your next car on the dyno a little bit better and gather more meaningful information. Before I get to the results, let's start with what were the testing conditions and what were the testing parameters for the day. Test conditions were about 45 degrees Fahrenheit when we started and about 48 degrees Fahrenheit when it stopped. This was an outdoor dyno with a couple fans in front of the car to make sure the car was getting fresh air. Relative humidity was almost zero and it was at sea level. Those three things combined equal perfect conditions for making power. Cool, dry morning at sea level. It doesn't get any more ideal than that. So keep that in mind when we talk about the results. The second thing I want to address before we get to the numbers is that I know I'm going to get some comments about this. Yes, I should have baselined the car on pump gas if I had the opportunity. And you know what? You're absolutely right. But the dyno is expensive, so I had to pick and choose. And also, it was a little bit of a timing thing. I didn't know when I was going to be able to get in there at the dyno, and I kind of messed up and put the 85 in the car when I shouldn't have, because I got a call from the dyno guy the next day. So it is what it is, but that's okay. The third and final thing before we get to the numbers is, what did we test? That's really easy. I was testing the differences between the Stage 2 Plus E85 tune version 3.02 versus the version 4 tune, which is coming out soon. That was really what I was after. Most of the time this car is going to be running E85 unless it's at SCCA events, in which case I'll just switch back to pump gas. So I really only care about these E85 numbers, to be honest. Pump gas stuff, yeah, it would be nice to know, and I will go back to the dyno once I have 91 octane in it with the header, because that's going to be STX trim and that is important to me. So I'll find out that at a later date. Now, the numbers. Drum roll, please. That's over 200 at the wheels. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't expect that. I was going into today hoping to see above 185 wheel horsepower. I was shocked when I found out it made over 200 at the wheels. And it also made great torque. It made almost 160 foot-pounds. The official number would be 159.5. We could round that up to 160, but that's pretty good. Considering the 2017 is rated at 205 crank horsepower and it made 205 wheel horsepower today, that's seriously impressive. I think that's the best bang for buck upgrade I've probably ever experienced in a car. I've been tuning cars a long time and I'm still blown away that it made this much power out of the box. And it feels great on the road too. There's really no denying that. You can drive it and I'll tell you, it doesn't feel like a stock 86. Let's get to the scientific part of this. We were testing the version 3 tune versus the version 4 tune, and I wanted to find out which was better. So here's the results for what was better. The red line is going to be the version 4 tune and the blue line is the version 3 tune. So you can see that the power comes on sooner, it reduces the torque dip, and overall it makes a lot more power. Now, these are just 2 runs, and something I want to point out that some people do is they'll do what are called glory runs or power runs, where they let the car cool down. I don't do any of that. In fact, I made the 205 horsepower at the end. So that was one of the hottest runs the car made, and it still made power. Now, part of that is because of the weather and our location, but nonetheless, this wasn't some run that I just sat there and waited until the oil was just barely hot enough to run it up. So this is a legitimate number you're going to see in the real world, which is really cool. And same for the version 3 tunes. We ran it on the dyno for a while to make sure it got hot. That's important. The car isn't cold in this perfect condition out on the street of the racetrack. It's hot. So that's important to test when you're at the dyno. Don't be afraid to run the car a lot. Again, it comes back to maximizing your time there. It's expensive, but there's a smart way to do it. Before we talk about where we're going and what's the next upgrade, I want to talk about power bands, power curves, and a few things that are going on with the 86. So let's start out by talking about the torque curve and the plot on the graph here. The torque curve, other than the dip, is actually really flat, and I think that's a strong point in this car. In fact, compared to, say, an S2000, this is actually better. It's more usable, it's more drivable. Yes, I know the torque dip is awful. I'm working to fix that, but really, it's not that bad. Stop complaining. Just being honest. Now, outside of the torque dip at about 4,400 RPM, which you're never going to drop down below if you're driving the car aggressively, the torque is really strong. In fact, on the dyno graph, I have a data printout, and you can see the torque is holding within a couple foot-pounds across the range. That's really impressive, and that makes for a really fun car to drive, and one that pulls out of corners even if you're a little low in the RPM. So that's awesome. This overall is a huge win. I know that the torque dip is going to be eliminated, or mostly eliminated once I put the header on, and that's going to make it that much better. Likewise, the power curve, nothing crazy to see here. It's pretty much what I'd expect. Small dip in the torque dip area. Again, normal with a stock header, but it's not too bad. And overall, it's great. I mean, this is a solid result for a basically stock car with a Catback and some E85 in it. Really awesome. So overall, couldn't recommend an OpenFlash tablet more, particularly if you're on a budget. E85. Keep your car stock and drive it, because that's pretty much the best bang for buck you're ever going to get. There's no way to get around it. So, I can say we made over 200 wheel horsepower on a stock 86. So what's next? Disappointment? Well, no. But what that tells me is most of the gains have been had. I don't expect a huge difference with the header. I'm not particularly interested in testing super exotic $2,500 headers. They really don't have any relevance unless you're really going for every last bit. And that's okay if you are. They have their purpose, they have their place, but for me, this is supposed to be a build that's representative of what anybody else could do, and that's really my style, and that's how I roll. So for the header, this is an OpenFlash Performance 3 header with integrated overpipe. Pick this up used. I'm all about value. I think the dyno plots I've seen for this header show that for the money, this is about as good as it gets. I'm not a particular fan of the unequal length sound, but I can't argue with the results on this. I would like to test this with an equal length header. I'm going to try and get my hands on a Tomei, maybe an Ace header, but those are a little pricey. I think the Tomei is really what I have my eye on for an equal length header, and maybe we'll do some back-to-back, I don't know. But for now, this is what's going to go in the car next week. And next Friday, a week from today, or a week from when this is being filmed, I'm going to be back on the same dyno with the same tank of gas, same tune, version 4, stage 2 plus E85 tune, and see what happens. Until then, I'm Sean with a driver's perspective.